Ken O'Keefe, these details behind the missile strikes that Iran has conducted have just come through in the past hour, of which is the reason why we're holding this special. And I'd like to just zoom in on another additional detail that has just come through, and that is the fact that there were 3 Daesh vehicles in Mayadeen in Syria that were targeted, and 17 terrorists were killed as a result of Iran's missile attack on those 3 vehicles. At this point, Ken O'Keefe, your reaction to this, and curiously, we really haven't heard much from the U.S. regarding the incident in detail, as you would expect, either from Donald Trump himself or the White House.
Well, I think the first thing that really needs to be said is that Iran's history is, as you know, it's very admirable. There has only been one war, which all of the Iranian people know very well, was the imposed war forced upon it by the empire, by our government, the United States, and Western governments as a whole. And for literally centuries, Iran has not indulged in any war-making activity other than that one opposed war. And when they finally do exercise military prowess and power, well, we can see the effectiveness of it. Yet here we stand with the United States of America, the biggest military machine in the history of our world. We spend in America the vast majority of our taxes in order to prop up this military, which is called defense, when it is precisely the opposite of defense. I remember back, I'm sure many who are thinking people also remember back after 9/11, which of course is the ultimate false flag event that involved Israeli Mossad and traitors within intelligence services in the United States and also military and government. I remember the story being told by the powers that be, or the puppets in office at the time, that we needed to fight this war on terror, and they hated us because of our values, they hated our freedom, and ever since that time the freedoms have been cut. Treasonous laws such as the NDAA, the Patriot Acts 1 and 2 have been passed by successively treasonous governments who all swore to uphold the United States Constitution while defiling the U.S. Constitution to the point where it hardly even exists at this point. And also telling us that what they needed to do was go off and fight these terrorists in distant lands and use things like drones and massive bombing campaigns and regime change policies. And that at the end of all this, after we've given up our freedom and bombed people to the Stone Age, then we would be able to kill all the terrorists and the world would be a better place. Here we sit 16 years later. Terrorism is of course on the rise because we're not fighting terrorism in the West. What we do, just by its very nature, inherently recruits terrorism. I'm sure anyone with half a brain who's serious and will be honest with themselves acknowledges, especially the American people, will acknowledge that if the situation were reversed, and let us say that America was not the most powerful nation in the world that spends ungodly amounts of money on military, let's just say that they're more sensible and they kind of tend to stick to their own business, and some offensive, grotesque, hypocritical nation that spends most of its money on military prowess halfway around the world decided that it covets something that the American people wanted, and ultimately concocts a bunch of lies in order to invade and occupy and bomb and kill people en masse. I don't know how many American people are going to deny that if that situation occurred to them, they would fight with every last ounce of their breath to be able to repel such an invader. But Iran has sat here for literally decades now, surrounded by the U.S. imperial machine, all the while holding back and doing literally nothing in terms of military prowess, simply sticking to the course, being a moral nation, not indulging in unwanted, unneeded violence, wars of aggression and whatnot, trying to allow sense and sensibility and reason and logic and morals and ethics be the example to the rest of the world, and yet it sits here continuously threatened because we live in a world in which might makes right. And the United States has been able to get away with virtually everything and anything, and there is a trail of tears and destruction so hard and so long we can't measure it. Just in Vietnam alone, we killed 2 to 4 million Asians, just Vietnam alone. We never even apologized for that. There are still people suffering from the millions of gallons of Agent Orange that we dropped in Vietnam, much less the bombs which equaled more than all of World War II combined. That's just one place. We add up everything together. America is nothing but a war-making machine. I believe that President Eisenhower was very correct in warning against the military-industrial complex. I believe the last president to have any true honor was John F. Kennedy, who was fighting these very forces, these enemies inside the gate. way back in 1960s. In 1963, he paid the ultimate price for that, and he was taken out, I am 100% sure, by agents of Israel who did not want him to inspect Dimona, the nuclear power plant in Israel, which would have made the world a much safer place had he succeeded. He was going to stop the Israeli lobby, the American Zionist Council at the time, now AIPAC. And it couldn't be more obvious. AIPAC and the Israeli lobby, the Jewish supremacist Talmudic pedophile cult that seemingly runs the world through the banksters, that cult owns the U.S. government, literally. And the U.S. service members who are now in the U.S. military are literally agents of ISIS and Al-Qaeda before it. And I'm one of those stupid people who joined for that stuff, not knowing that my nation was lying to me, and that in fact Henry Kissinger was right, that U.S. military are nothing but dumb animals to be used for their wars, in this case fighting for ISIS, these head choppers that we finance through Saudi Arabia. It is so grotesque, so completely grotesque, it's just hard to actually measure it. I'm beyond at this point, personally, even finding any real value in rehashing these things over and over. If it's not obvious to people at this point, then you're so completely brainwashed and brain damaged, quite frankly, that cognitive dissonance has literally got a hold of you, and demons now control your actions even by your inaction. You are serving demonic forces. There is no truth at all in what the United States says, ever. And Donald Trump is simply the latest in a long list of traitors who made all sorts of promises, who said he wasn't going to take us into these endless wars, who we said we weren't going to go fighting for other nations, particularly Israel, and yet every single thing he promised has become a lie, to the point that we're bombing Syria because it's fighting ISIS on its own land. I just don't know how much more worse it could get. If someone could clue me in as to how much more worse it can get, I'd be happy to hear it.